In chapter 7 of Hard Times, we get an introduction to Mrs. Sparsit, who's a woman who lives with Mr. Bounderby, and we also find out a little bit more about Sissy Jupe as she sort of enters and speaks to him and Gregor. Chapter 8 is a particularly significant chapter. It's called Never Wonder, and it's about the philosophy basically of utilitarianism, and we see exactly what it's done to Louisa and Tom as children. So I think the first thing that I want to sort of look at is on page 46, right at the top. Mrs. Sparsit is describing as having a Coriolanus style of nose. Okay, basically that means a Roman nose, but Coriolanus, the guy it's named after, was a Roman emperor. Shakespeare wrote a play on him, and basically he ignored the demands of the poor and was punished as a result. So again, we get, despite the satire of Dickens comparing us to this great historical figure, when actually she's quite a ridiculous woman in many ways, we also get again a prophetic warning that if we ignore the poor, we're going to get revolution, we're going to get danger. And then we get on page 47, she just over halfway down, she says to Mr. Bounderby, "You are quite another father to Louisa, sir." Okay, and she's saying it as an insult basically. Mr. Bounderby has got designs on Louisa, he wants to get married to her, and eventually that's exactly what does happen. So by saying he's like a father, Mrs. Sparsit is sort of having a dig at how old he is. But I think again Dickens is being a bit ironic there, because the point is that although Gregor is a much more well-meaning character than Bounderby, the effect that he is having is actually very similar to that of Bounderby. He is the one who has allowed Bounderby to step in towards the end of book 1 and marry her. Gregor's paved the way for that. We get, on page 49, about 5 lines down, Mr. Bounderby, bending himself at the knees, literally embraced his legs in his great satisfaction and laughed aloud. Okay, so again, this idea he is the self-made man and he's the one hugging himself. And again, Dickens is making the point that in this world without love, where people are just hands, they're not, they're not seen as having emotions, it paves the way for people like Mr. Bounderby, these people who, just love themselves, to actually really make these great strides. And compare that to Mrs. Sparsit towards the end of page 49, about 8 lines up. "You are very good indeed, sir," returned Mrs. Sparsit, shaking her head with state humility. "It is not worth speaking of." Again, it's another silenced woman. Despite being mocked and not a particularly positive character, Mrs. Sparsit is again showing what happens to these women in this society. And then actually a couple of lines after that, Sissy is brought in, and we're told she stood looking intently at him, and Louisa stood coldly by with her eyes upon the ground while he proceeded thus. So again, Sissy and Louisa, these silenced women, it's foreshadowing exactly what's going to happen to Louisa and how she's silenced at the end of book 1 and how the fire ends up breaking out as a result. Sissy expresses an emotion basically eventually, and reveals that she had this really happy time with her father just after halfway down page 50, and we're told it was only now when her sorrow broke out that Louisa looked at her. Okay, foreshadows Louisa's own emotion and fire breaking out. Those same words, broke out, we're told later on, fire breaks out. So again, this idea that this is a society that restrains women until eventually something sort of breaks out from them. Mrs. Sparsit, calls Mr. Bounderby a noodle at the end. It breaks out of her as well. Mrs. Gregor breaks out of her when she scrawls these symbols of no meaning on the bed as she dies. And then we find out that Sissy read her father all these fairy stories, which again are disapproved of, but again shows that Sissy has this far greater imagination. And we're told at the end, on the way, the very, very end of the chapter, on the way, Louisa never spoke one word, good or bad, and Mr. Bounderby went about his daily pursuits, and Mrs. Sparsit got behind her eyebrows and meditated in the gloom of that retreat all the evening. So again, Mrs. Sparsit and Louisa, despite being very different characters, both of them are these silenced women. And chapter 8 then gives us a clearer idea of what's going on in this society. First line, "Let us strike the keynote again before pursuing the tune." Okay, Dickens says, let us, we're involved in this as well. We're both like these composers, like these entertainers, Dickens and the narrator. They're these cacklers, they're like Sleary, these entertainers. And Dickens again is showing his disapproval of this system. The chapter title is Never Wonder. We're told about 5 or 6 lines down. That comes from Mr. Gregor once telling Louisa, never wonder. Okay. And we're told basically that a couple of lines after that, that herein lay the spring of the mechanical art and mystery of educating the reason without stooping to the cultivation of the sentiments and affection. Again, Gregor is compared to this gardener or this farmer. He hasn't cultivated affection. So again, the book is called Sowing. We get that he will reap this. He has planted these things in his children. We're told on page 52, there was a library in Coketown to which general access was easy. Mr. Gregor greatly torments his mind about what the people read in this library. So again, books, education, imagination is seen as a source of fear for these people. Victorian society got by on keeping people down, keeping people as hands and as items in a system. And Dickens' point is that actually, ironically, that's what allows the revolution to happen. If you educate these people, if you let them wonder and let them have emotion, have feeling, there won't be a threat anymore. We're told about a third of the way down the page that the people took Defoe to their bosoms instead of Euclid and seemed to be on the whole more comforted by Goldsmith than by Cocker. Basically, Dickens is talking about Defoe and Cocker, and Goldsmith, these popular authors of the time, just like he was a very popular author, and he's making the case that actually these popular authors are just as good, if not better, than these classical ones who are respected. He's making the case that actually popular authors, entertainers who were read for their own sake, are actually a very important presence because they allow people's minds to wonder. In this chapter that's called, Never Wonder. We're told about Louisa towards the bottom of page 52, sitting in the darker corner by the fireside, now looking at him, now looking at the bright sparks as they dropped upon the hearth. So again, that symbol is a symbol of Louisa. She is like one of these sparks in the fire that's sort of dying out because she's got nothing to sort of burn, nothing to rest on. We find out that Tom again is very easily led. We're told that Louisa basically is pitying the situation, but Tom says about 2/3 of the way down, you're a girl, and a girl comes out of it better than a boy does. Again, this focus on society and gender, but Tom's inability to sort of understand that really. He just sees that Louisa's better off because she can, eventually marry Bounderby and be good off. He hasn't got that same personality. There's no spark in Tom at all. He's this robot. About a quarter of the way down page 54, we're told their shadows were defined upon the wall, but those of the high presses in the room were all blended together on the wall and on the ceiling, as if the brother and sister were overhung by a dark cavern. So again, this is foreshadowing the downfall later on. Both of them have got this downfall coming, it's hanging over them. But again, it's a cavern, just like the schoolroom is a vault. It's focusing on what's not there. Although they've got these facts, Dickens is focused on this gap in them, this darkness, this shadow, this lack of imagination that they've got. And then towards the bottom of the page, we get Louisa say about 3/4 of the way down, Tom inquired his sister slowly and in a curious tone, as if she were reading what she asked in the fire and it were not quite plainly written there. Do you look forward with any satisfaction to this change to Mr. Bounderby's? So again, Louisa was getting that meaning from the fire. That affinity has been built up by Dickens, that the fire and Louisa are very much the same. Tom says basically, it takes Louisa so long to answer him, that Tom, about a few lines down on page 55, went and leaned on the back of her chair to contemplate the fire which so engrossed her from her point of view and see what he could make of it. The idea that he just can't see where Louisa's coming from. He's looking at the fire, but he doesn't see the same thing. They are fundamentally different characters. And then we find out why Louisa is looking at the fire. About a third of the way down the page, she says, I don't see anything in it, Tom, particularly, but since I have been looking at it, I've been wondering about you and me grown up. Okay, so again, the fire is linked to their future. The sparks that are burning out linked to Louisa and Tom's future, because Louisa is very much this spark that's got nothing to light upon and is going to burn out. That foreshadows the end when Dickens himself looks into the future and gives us this idea that Louisa isn't a mother, although she can have affection for his children, that Tom sort of dies repenting, but Louisa will never have children because of this childhood that she's had. So again, Dickens is sowing the seeds in childhood that are going to be sort of reaped later on, and the fire is a great symbol that comes again and again and again through the novel of how he does that and how he shows that despite all the things that are in the children, we also notice that there's something missing. There's this big dark cavern hanging over them, but also inside them.